The greatest danger in life is not ignorance, but seeing too much of what others never want to acknowledge. Because when you perceive the hidden masks, when you read the deception or the pain others try to bury, you don't just carry the truth, you also bear the heavy price it demands. Imagine this in a corporate meeting. Everyone nods politely, appearing agreeable, yet you can clearly sense the tension behind every smile. Or at a family dinner where laughter fills the room, but you notice the cold glances, the forced words, and recognize fractures carefully concealed by politeness. Others may ignore it, reassuring themselves that everything is fine. But for those with the ability to see more, that is impossible. They see through the mask. They sense what has never been spoken, and that is often the origin of their loneliness. Carl Jung described this as the danger of excessive perception, when a person perceives not just the surface, but also touches the deeper layers that the collective unconscious desperately tries to hide. Such individuals become mirrors reflecting the shadow of others. And what is the result? Instead of gratitude, they are often met with resentment. Instead of being heard, they are dismissed as too sensitive, difficult, or even disruptive. In today's world, especially in a culture that prizes outward positivity, the cost of seeing the truth is even higher. People praise cheerfulness, harmony, and the ability to quickly move on. But those who dare to point out contradictions, who call attention to what no one wants to face, are swiftly isolated, because no one likes being forced to confront their own darkness. Those who carry this capacity gradually learn to remain silent. Yet their silence is not because they lack words, it is because they know too much. Think of a friend in a group who, when everyone is cheering for a wrong decision, is the only one who dares to object. Instead of being respected, they are branded the one who kills the vibe or doesn't fit in. In relationships, the same holds true. Someone may sense the falseness behind a smile, the coldness behind promises, but when they voice it, the reaction is denial or even hostility. The truth they carry isolates them. The price is not only social isolation, but also a profound inner struggle. Those who see too much often feel alien, as though they don't belong. They live with a paradox. Their gift allows them to understand others deeply, but it also makes genuine connection difficult. It's as if an invisible wall separates them, the world of illusions on one side, and the raw flow of truth they alone perceive on the other. Jung described this as a dangerous stage where one might fall into extremes, dissolving into others to avoid loneliness, or shutting down completely and slipping into despair. Both lead to spiritual exhaustion. That is why many with strong intuition suffer what can be called soul fatigue, like an antenna picking up endless signals but never having an off switch. So is truth always a double-edged sword? The answer lies in how we use it. Those who see more must learn what Jung called standing firm in the self, knowing which emotions are theirs and which belong to the world around them. Without this boundary, they risk being drowned by the very truths they perceive. In real life, many fall into this trap. They become containers for others' pain and tension, yet have no place to release their own. Over time, they turn into emotional trash bins, lonely and drained. At that point, the cost of truth is no longer philosophical. It is lived exhaustion, wearing down both body and spirit. And yet, Jung reminds us it is precisely in the darkness that rebirth begins. Perhaps those who see too much are not cursed. They have simply been given a harder lesson than most. Once they learn to walk through it, once they establish boundaries, this ability ceases to be a burden and becomes a gift that can illuminate others while also liberating themselves. The ability to see more, as Jung described, actually appears in different forms, different channels of intuition, like invisible frequencies a person can tune into. Understanding these forms helps explain why some people consistently perceive what others miss. And it also teaches them how to protect themselves from being overwhelmed by what they perceive. Emotional intuition, sensing the atmosphere without anyone speaking. A sidelong glance, a faint sigh, a forced smile, all strike them like loud signals. This can be exhausting as they constantly read others' tension or sadness. Many describe leaving a party not energized, but depleted, carrying others' burdens home. Situational intuition, the capacity to foresee outcomes, not fortune telling, but a sharpness with details. In work, they can instantly see where a project will collapse. In relationships, they sense dissolution long before it shows on the surface. Others may not believe them, but time often proves them right. Personal intuition, perceiving someone's essence beneath the mask. At first meeting, they can sense wounds or truths the other hides. This makes them valuable confidants, but also feared, because few want their hidden shadows exposed. Spiritual intuition, feeling a connection to something larger than oneself. It is not only sensitivity to emotions, but also a resonance with the deeper currents of the collective unconscious. Those who have it often describe a sense of being guided, as if by an invisible order. It gives them strength, but also demands discernment learning to tell genuine intuition from the anxious whispers of the ego. Despite their differences, these four forms share one truth. They set a person apart. That difference can be a gift or a burden. In a world addicted to speed and appearances, hypersensitivity can feel like holding a razor blade capable of delicate refinement, but just as capable of cutting oneself. This is why Jung always emphasized the essential lesson. If you have this gift, you must learn to live with it rather than be ruled by it. The very gift itself often leads to a suffering difficult to name spiritual exhaustion. When someone possesses strong intuition, they live as though they are a living antenna, always switched on. Every signal, however faint, pours into them at once. A colleague's distant gaze, a muffled sob at the end of a phone call, the subtle change in a loved one's voice, all of it touches them. Not only touches, but lingers, weighing heavily on their mind. The experience is like standing in a crowded square where thousands of people are speaking at once. For most, the noise would blur into a general hum, but for the living antenna, every sentence, every word, every emotional nuance rings out in sharp detail. This intensity makes the body tense, the mind fatigued, and ultimately leads to depletion. It is not ordinary tiredness, but erosion at the deepest level, what Jung would call the soul. And in modern society, the pressure is even greater. We live among glowing screens, endless social media noise, a relentless flood of news. Those with heightened intuition feel drowned in a storm of emotional scripts. Collective fear when war breaks out. Insecurity when the economy falters, or the waves of envy, anger, and discontent that people project openly online. Their antenna does not just receive signals from individuals, it also picks up the atmosphere of the collective, what Jung called the collective unconscious. This is why many sensitive people choose withdrawal, not because they hate the world, but because their body and mind need silence in order to switch off the antenna. Yet to outsiders, this withdrawal is often misunderstood as coldness, distance, even strangeness. But for them, it is self-preservation. Without it, the overload slowly wears them down, turning them into shadows of themselves. Jung emphasized that the greatest darkness does not lie outside, but in failing to learn how to live with one's own energy. A sensitive person who cannot establish boundaries will be devoured. They become emotional containers for everyone else while neglecting their own inner needs. At that point, the gift of intuition transforms into a burden. In reality, many fall into depression or chronic anxiety for this reason. They exist in a state of perpetual alertness like sentinels who never leave their post. By day they smile, but at night the accumulated fatigue turns into long bouts of sleeplessness. It is the soul's way of whispering, "Enough, rest." But this exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that a refined capacity has been overused without balance. Like a precious instrument played without pause, the strings eventually snap. Those with strong intuition must learn to retune themselves by creating spaces of quiet, a walk in the park a morning without social media, or simply sitting in stillness and letting feelings drift past like clouds. Sometimes the solution lies in learning to give back what is not theirs. Many sensitive people unconsciously carry the pain of others as though it were their duty. Yet Jung reminded us maturity is knowing how to distinguish between one's own shadow and the shadow of another. Not every feeling that arrives needs to be held. Some only need to be acknowledged and then released. Seen in this light, spiritual exhaustion is the soul's warning. Set boundaries, protect the inner light. Without this, vitality fades and intuition, rather than guiding, begins to drag a person into the abyss. Thus, instead of seeing oneself as a passive antenna, one must learn to use it actively, choosing which signals to keep, which to release. In this process, a person steps into a new stage of growth, not merely absorbing, but mastering the gift. The greatest danger for highly sensitive, intuitive souls does not come from the outer world, but from unlimited openness to the collective unconscious. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious does not refer only to ancient archetypes passed through generations, but also to the stream of emotional energy flowing daily among people. It includes collective fear during economic upheaval, anxiety during pandemics, or the rage and hatred broadcast across the media. Sensitive souls do not merely notice this, they feel it in their bones, and thus they risk becoming victims of what they absorb. Like sponges, they soak up everything: fear, anger, envy, disappointment. Unable to discern what belongs to them and what does not, they may come to believe they are living in a life full of fear, when in truth, much of it is borrowed from others. A woman may feel heavy and hopeless without knowing why, simply because her workplace is steeped in tension. A man may erupt in anger without cause, having unconsciously absorbed resentment from his family or society. This is the moment when the antenna no longer serves them, but begins to control them. Instead of observing, they are overwhelmed. Instead of mastering, they are mastered. Even worse, when one dissolves into the collective unconscious, they risk losing their true self. Jung called this identification with the shadow. Immersed in the crowd's fear or anger, they no longer recognize their own boundaries. This is when we witness mass eruptions, riots, violence, toxic words flooding online. Sensitive souls, if unguarded, are swept away like fragile sails in a storm. The price is spiritual depletion. For when a person lives too long in borrowed energies, their soul loses the strength to sustain its own life force. They become dim, weary, often slipping into depression without understanding why. This is the dark side of intuition. Without boundaries, it becomes a prison. But the most frightening cost is disorientation. Under the sway of the collective, they lose touch with their own inner voice. They no longer know what they truly want, what belongs to them, and what belongs to the crowd. They begin to live like shadows, reacting, worrying, fearing, without inner freedom. Jung warned, losing connection with the authentic self is the root of true spiritual crisis. And yet, here lies the paradox. The greatest danger conceals the greatest opportunity. For the collective unconscious is not only shadow, it also contains light. If a person learns not to dissolve into it, but to stand as an observer, they can transform that stream into knowledge. Instead of being victims, they become witnesses. Instead of being swept away, they learn to read the language of the collective soul. To do this, however, one must first master the art of boundaries. Boundaries do not mean walls that cut us off from the world, but the ability to choose which signals to keep, which to let go. Only then does the antenna become a tool of clarity, not a source of suffering. The danger of dissolving into the collective unconscious is thus a profound reminder. Every person must learn. Discernment must find the courage to step away from noise and return to listening within, for otherwise the inner light will be smothered by borrowed darkness. And that is the true tragedy, to live an entire life as a reflection of others without ever touching one's own truth. There are souls who, when submerged too long in the collective darkness, cannot find their way back. Friedrich Nietzsche's is a tragic example. A thinker of extraordinary brilliance, yet his profound intuitions about the emptiness and meaninglessness of his age consumed him. Nietzsche saw the abyss where old values had collapsed, but lacked the foundation to sustain himself in building something new. And so he fell, his mind shattered, his body broken, a genius pushed into ruin. This is the harsh shadow side of intuition, unguided. When one sees too much, hears too deeply without an anchor to balance it, the vision becomes a crushing burden. Nietzsche once wrote, "When you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." That sentence was not just philosophy, but his own fate, pulled into the abyss of the soul. By contrast, others have chosen a different path. Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, also journeyed into the depths of the unconscious. But rather than being devoured, he found light within it. Eckhart realized that all suffering, all chaos could become the beginning of rebirth, if one could release the ego and open to the sacred presence of the now. He did not fight the darkness, nor let it swallow him. Instead, he transformed it into a doorway, into union with the greater whole. This is the great divergence, the same confrontation with darkness, yet one collapses for lack of support, while the other transcends through transformation. Jung understood this as the difference between identification and individuation. To be identified is to be taken over by darkness, to become its victim. To individuate is to accept the darkness as part of oneself, neither denying it, nor fleeing, nor letting it rule. To bring it into consciousness, and through that, to discover freedom. In modern life, this branching remains clear. Some cannot withstand the pressure of society's noise, news, arguments, judgments, and fall into depression, anxiety, or addiction. They are like Nietzsche, seeing too much, yet unable to find meaning. Others, however, faced with the same chaos, discover. Eckhart's way, they choose silence, meditation, healthy retreat to restore inner strength. From that stillness they return, carrying a new light capable of illuminating themselves and others. We must admit, honestly, anyone who enters the depths of the unconscious faces this danger. No one is immune. True courage is not only daring to look at the darkness, but daring to build an anchor. That anchor might be spiritual faith, a healthy community, or simply the daily habit of silence to discern. What is my own voice and what is merely the echo of the collective Nietzsche is the warning. Eckhart is the example. One shows the cost of lacking a foundation. The other reveals the power of transformation. And between them, Jung gives us a map. He teaches, do not deify the darkness, nor treat it as the enemy, but use it as material for growth. What matters is not what you see in the darkness, but what you do with what you see. If you let it sweep you away, you collapse. If you learn to dialogue with it, you are reborn. If Nietzsche is the warning and Eckhart the guide, then Jung offers the map. He reminds us humanity cannot avoid the darkness, but we can choose how to walk through it with awareness. The path, he says, unfolds in 3 steps: recognition, integration, conscious participation. Recognition. Darkness is not foreign. It lives in the moments we grow angry, jealous, or small before another's success. Instead of denial or blame, Jung invites us to pause and ask, why am I reacting this way? What fear hides beneath this anger? What unacknowledged longing lies in this envy? The question itself is the doorway. To name the darkness is to reclaim power instead of letting it silently rule. Integration. To recognize darkness does not mean to destroy it, but to accept it as part of the whole self. Jung emphasized that only by embracing both light and shadow can a person become complete. Someone who knows they can feel anger but also learns to use that anger as energy to defend what matters. Someone who admits envy but instead of shame channels it into motivation. Integration turns shadow into raw material for growth. Conscious participation. This is the decisive difference between those swept up by unconscious currents and those who use them as fuel for creativity. Conscious participation means engaging with life and community, but no longer in an unconscious reactive state. Such a person knows how to set boundaries, how to distinguish their own voice from the echo of the collective. They can live amid noise without being carried away, love without losing themselves. In today's world, this path is more practical than ever. When we recognize our own darkness, we grow less harsh toward the darkness in others. When we integrate our fragility, we grow softer without fear. And when we participate consciously, we bring that awareness into work, family, and relationships, transforming each moment into an opportunity for wholeness. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is not just philosophy, it is a directive. Every crisis, every wound, every time we hit the bottom of despair, these are invitations to see the darkness and begin this process. Recognition, integration, and conscious participation. These steps do not make us perfect. They make us ourselves. And that is true freedom. When a person is brave enough to walk the full journey of confrontation and integration, a new door opens, the true self is revealed. No longer a role played to please others, no longer a mask worn to avoid judgment, but an authentic, natural presence. One that requires no proof. Jung called this the step into individuation, the stage where a human being is no longer dissolved into the crowd, no longer defined by the expectations of parents, friends, or society. In this state, connection with others still exists, but it is no longer consuming. They can love without losing themselves, empathize without carrying the entire burden of another's pain. Instead of being a life buoy for others to cling to, they become a lamp radiant yet unextinguished by anyone's gust of wind. When a person rediscovers their true identity, their presence changes everything. In conversation, they don't need many words, yet others feel their sincerity. In a group, they don't seek the spotlight, yet become a quiet anchor of safety. They no longer chase affection, yet naturally command respect. Without effort to prove, they become living proof that inner freedom carries a lasting power greater than appearance or fame. This has a profound effect on relationships. Those who have found their true self are no longer swept into cycles of giving until exhausted, or loving to be validated. They can say no without guilt. They can keep distance while remaining warm. Healthy boundaries cease to be walls. They become strong frameworks where love and connection grow in a mature way. In daily life, this may appear in the simplest details. Someone who once feared rejection can now speak their truth with head held high. Someone who once silently endured injustice can now raise their voice without carrying hatred. Someone who once felt invisible can now stand firmly with a quiet yet undeniable presence. Jung once said, "What we do not make conscious will appear in our lives as fate." When a person transforms the unconscious into consciousness, they step out of repetitive destiny and into a life they themselves choose. And the most important choice is not a partner, a career, or a city, but the choice to live as oneself, no longer dissolved into expectations or shadows of others. This is when sensitivity is no longer a burden, but a gift. This is when love is no longer a gilded cage, but an open sky for wings to soar. And this is when a person steps into the most mature love of all, the love of the self, the foundation upon which all other connections become pure and enduring. There is a moment in the journey of sensitive souls after passing through the long night of confusion, after facing the darkness, and embracing fragments once thought irreparable. They rise, not as victims, but as witnesses to growth. At this point, the ability to see, to feel, and to touch the depth of others is no longer a burden. It becomes a mission. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." When one has gone deep enough within, they awaken not only for themselves. They become torchbearers for others, revealing what lies hidden in the dark, not through dogma or theory, but through their very presence. Others sense in them a strange safety, as if near them one is allowed to be fully honest without pretense. In everyday life, this too manifests simply. They no longer need to fight to be seen, yet their presence shifts the atmosphere of a room. When someone shares their pain, they do not rush to advise, but listen with a heart of deep understanding. Such listening does not make others feel small. It illuminates them, helping them see themselves more clearly. This role is not easy, A true guide does not only say what is pleasant to hear, sometimes their very presence is a mirror that forces others to face unacknowledged shadows. Some will be grateful, some resistant, some even avoidant. But it is in this reflection that the awakening of the community begins. Those who dare to stand in this role must accept solitude. For to pioneer often means to walk ahead, and to walk ahead often means not yet being understood. Yet the reward is profound. When sensitivity is transformed into orientation, they become lighthouses in this chaotic society. Amid the noise of comparison and competition, they remind us of another way, the way of the inner life of stillness, of rediscovering essence. They do not need slogans, they do not need to shout. They guide by living their lives themselves, a testament that one can be both sensitive and strong, both compassionate and steadfast. The guide of consciousness is not a distant master, but a deeply human being who knows pain, fatigue, and wounds. And precisely because of this, they are trustworthy. Others see in them a real journey from brokenness to wholeness, from chaos to order, from darkness to light. And that journey inspires hope. If they could do it, anyone can. The most important truth once they step into this role is that they no longer fear loss. They understand that relationships may shift, people may come and go, careers may rise and fall, but all these are surface waves. What they hold is the deeper current stability born from reconciliation with themselves. And when they live from that depth, every word, every glance, every action becomes a seed planted into the collective unconscious. In a world so unstable, guides need not stand on pedestals to preach. Sometimes simply sitting with someone in pain or walking quietly while leaving footprints for others to follow is enough. This quietness is what resonates most because it does not come from an ego seeking to prove, but from a self that has found wholeness. Jung emphasized, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The guide is the living proof of this. They do not hand anyone ready-made light, but teach others to discover their own inner flame. And so the circle closes. What was once a curse has become a gift. What was once the burden of overabsorption has become a path for the community. What was once fear of darkness has become its foundation for radiance. And whether the world understands or not, it is illuminated by their presence, the pioneers of consciousness. Those with piercing vision often pay the price of loneliness. Seeing too much, feeling too deeply, they may seem out of place for most and are not yet ready to face the raw truth about themselves. This is the danger of deep perception. Jung warned of, it can exile those who bear it, yet within it also lies extraordinary potential. If they learn to stand firm, they are no longer crushed by perception. They transform it into a gift, the gift of illumination. Rather than exposing faults to condemn, they reflect truth with a compassionate heart so others can face their shadows without shame. They become bridges showing that darkness is not punishment, but the raw material for growth. To transform danger into gift is to use intuition and sensitivity not to judge, but to guide. They are no longer overwhelmed victims nor recluses rejecting the world. They become bringers of light, reminders that within every shadow lies the seed of rebirth. And this is the final message. Those who carry the weight of seeing too much can turn it into humanity's inheritance, if they dare to love and integrate themselves. Perhaps after all, the greatest message of this journey is this: you are not alone. Everyone has shadows, fears, silences they cannot share. But by daring to walk the path of facing them, you become a living testament to inner strength. If you've listened this far, I believe a quiet reminder is already stirring in your heart that your sensitivity, your depth, even your wounds that once made you feel out of place are in truth your greatest gifts. They do not bind you. They are waiting to be used to illuminate yourself and those around you. And if you wish to continue this journey of soul exploration, of diving deeper into both darkness and light, stay with this channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. So each week we can walk further along the path Jung traced, the path toward wholeness and inner freedom. See this place as a safe space, a reminder that you are enough, you are worthy, and you never have to walk alone.